My new night shift was supposed to be easy. Seriously. A friend of a friend knew a guy, and next thing I knew, I was making nearly triple the minimum wage to be a glorified scarecrow. Officially, my title was night attendant at the old Blackwood Station, a place that hadn't seen a passenger train in, like, 40 years. My only job was to sit in this quiet, forgotten station from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and make sure no one wandered onto the decommissioned tracks. Drunks and teenagers, the hiring manager had mumbled over the phone, his voice all raspy and dry. Insurance thing, you just sit there, read a book, easy money. And for a little while, he was right. The station was this cathedral of decay, smelling of dust, ozone, and the ghosts of a million hurried goodbyes. The giant clock in the main hall was frozen, its hands pointing forever to 4:30. The fluorescent lights just hummed this tired, buzzing tune, casting these long, dancing shadows that really played tricks on your eyes. For the first couple of hours of my first shift, I did exactly what he'd said. I read a paperback, drank lukewarm coffee from a thermos, and just listened to the deep, heavy silence of the place. The guy I was taking over for, a withered old man named Arthur, met me at the start of my shift to hand over the keys. He was all sharp angles and papery skin, and he moved with this slow, deliberate shuffle of a man who's seen way too many sunrises from the wrong side of a window. He didn't say much, just pointed out the circuit breaker, the moody radiator, and the small, cramped ticket booth that was gonna be my home for the night. "Everything you need is in there," he'd said, his eyes sort of darting away from mine. "Just stick to the instructions. Don't get creative. This isn't a place for creativity." Before I could even ask what he meant, he was gone, just melting into the evening gloom like he was part of it. Inside the booth, the air was thick with the smell of stale cigarettes and something else. Something metallic and cold. A single wooden stool stood in front of a wide, thick-paned glass window looking out onto the platforms. And there, sitting dead center on the worn-out counter, was a single laminated sheet of paper. It was yellowed with age, its edges grimy from what looked like years of handling. At the top, in neat typed capital letters, were the words, "The Rules." I picked it up. It felt weirdly heavy. I figured it had to be some kind of elaborate prank, you know? A hazing ritual for the new guy. I even chuckled to myself, thinking Arthur had a strange sense of humor. Then I started to read. Rule number 1. The station officially closes at midnight. Lock the main entrance. Do not, under any circumstances, unlock it for anyone until your shift ends at 7 a.m. Their pleas are not what they seem. Okay, a little creepy, but pretty standard for a weird night job. I kept reading. Rule number 2. At precisely 3 a.m., you may hear a whistling melody coming from down the tracks. It will sound distant, like a memory. Cover your ears. Do not listen to the tune. It isn't meant for you. My smile kind of faltered. This was more specific. More odd. Rule number 3. After the whistling stops, you will hear a low rumbling. It will start faint and grow louder. You will feel it in the floor, in your teeth. This is normal. Your job is to ignore it. Do not leave the booth to check the tracks. What you see there will not be a train. A cold knot started twisting in my stomach. This was no ordinary prank. The level of detail was just Unsettling. Rule number 4. At exactly 3:16 a.m., the station clock, your watch, and your phone will all stop. The buzzing of the lights will cease. The air will become perfectly still. Stay inside the booth. Do not look out the main hall window. You are safer where you are. My heart was starting to pound a little faster now. I glanced up at the grand clock in the hall, its hands still stuck at 4:30. A coincidence. It had to be. Rule number 5. A train will arrive on track 7 at 3:17 a.m. This is impossible, as track 7 was decommissioned in 1984. Acknowledge this fact, then immediately disregard it. The train is your only duty. Rule number 6. You are not a security guard. You are an attendant. Your purpose is to serve the dead. The passengers on the 3:17 train are not alive. Do not make eye contact. Do not speak to them unless spoken to. Keep your head down. Their grief is ancient and contagious. Rule number 7. No passengers will exit the train. However, if a passenger approaches your booth, pretend you do not see them. They may tap on the glass. They may whisper your name. Do not respond. They are testing you. Remember that you are protected only as long as you remain an observer. My hands were actually shaking a little. I put the list down, my throat suddenly bone dry. This was insane. It was a story, a fiction somebody cooked up to terrify me. And I have to admit, it was working. I almost packed up and left right then and there. But the thought of that paycheck, just how desperate I was, kept me glued to that stool. It's just a story, I told myself. A stupid, scary story. Then I saw the last rule, at the very bottom of the page. It was underlined twice, the ink darker than the rest, as if it was pressed into the paper with grim finality. Rule number 8. Never, under any circumstances, sell a ticket for the 3:17 a.m. ghost train. For the next few hours, I couldn't get those rules out of my head. I tried to laugh them off, but they'd already taken root. Every creak of the old building, every gust of wind that rattled the high windows, sent a jolt of anxiety right through me. I kept glancing at the clock on my phone, watching the numbers climb toward that awful hour. At midnight, I followed the first rule. I walked the length of the silent main hall, my footsteps echoing way too loudly in the huge space. The main doors were these heavy things, solid oak and brass. As I turned the massive key in the lock, I felt this profound sense of finality. Like I wasn't just locking people out, but locking myself in. The hours between midnight and 3 in the morning were the longest of my life. I couldn't read, couldn't listen to music. I just sat in the suffocating silence of the booth, my eyes fixed on the dark, empty maw of track 7. It was completely overgrown with weeds, the rails just streaks of rust half buried in dirt. No train had run on that line in my lifetime. It was impossible. Then my phone screen lit up. 3 a.m. I held my breath. Nothing. A minute passed, then another. I let out a shaky sigh of relief. See? Just a stupid prank. I was about to lean back when I heard it. It was faint. So faint I thought I was imagining it. A thin, whistling sound, like someone blowing over the top of a bottle. The melody was simple and sad, and it seemed to come from miles away, carried on a wind that wasn't blowing. The second rule slammed into my mind. Cover your ears. Do not listen to the tune. My hands flew up to my head, pressing my palms hard against my ears. but it was like trying to block out a thought. The tune was already inside my head, a mournful little earworm that made the hairs on my arms stand up. It was such a sad, lonely song. It felt ancient. After what felt like forever, it faded, leaving a silence that was somehow heavier than before. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Okay, that was weird, a coincidence. Maybe a stray sound from a factory nearby. The mind plays tricks on you when you're tired and spooked. Then came the rumbling. It started in the soles of my feet, a low, deep vibration that seemed to come from the very ground beneath the station. Rule number 3, you will feel it in the floor, in your teeth. It was true. My jaw was vibrating, a deep thrumming that resonated in my skull. It grew steadily louder, the sound of 1,000 tons of steel grinding its way through the earth. My every instinct screamed at me to run, to look, to see what impossible thing was causing this. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles white, and forced myself to stare straight ahead, focusing on a crack in the plaster wall. Don't look, don't look, don't look. The rumbling got worse, shaking the glass in the booth window. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. I looked at my phone. The screen was frozen. 3:16 a.m. I looked at my watch. The second hand was motionless. 3:16 a.m. I glanced out at the main hall. The grand clock, stuck at 4:30 all night, now read 3:16 a.m. Rule number 4. The station clock, your watch, and your phone will all stop. The buzz of the fluorescent lights? Gone. The air was dead, utterly still. My breath hitched in my chest. This wasn't a prank. This was real. And then, it came. From the blackness at the end of the tunnel, a single pinprick of light appeared. It didn't grow brighter like a normal headlight. It just was. There was no sound, no roaring engine, only the faintest, most hellish grinding of steel on rusted, forgotten tracks. A train, dark and ancient, slid out of the darkness and into the dim light of the platform. It was a steam locomotive, something from 100 years ago, trailing passenger cars with dark, unlit windows. Steam poured from its engine, but it wasn't normal steam. It was thick and black, like oil smoke, and it didn't drift away. It clung to the platform, coiling and writhing like it was alive. The train glided to a stop right in front of my booth on track 7. Rule number 5. A train will arrive on track 7 at 3:17 a.m. I swear I couldn't breathe. My body was locked in place by pure primal terror. I wanted to scream, to run, to smash the glass and just flee, but I was paralyzed. My eyes scanned the windows of the passenger cars. At first, all I saw was my own terrified reflection. Then, shapes started to form in the darkness inside. Vague silhouettes, the outlines of heads and shoulders. Passengers. Rule number 6. The passengers on the 3:17 train are not alive. Do not make eye contact. I ripped my eyes away, staring down at my own white-knuckled hands on the counter. I could feel their presence, a collective weight of sorrow that pressed in on the booth. The air grew cold, a deep chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I could feel them watching me. I could feel their dead eyes on my living skin. For a full minute, nothing happened. The silent, spectral train just sat there, waiting. My mind was racing, trying to process the impossible thing right outside my window. I was serving the dead. This was my job. Then the train's doors hissed open. Not the clean pneumatic sound of modern trains, but a dry scraping noise, like stone grinding on stone. A figure stepped out, a conductor in a tattered, old-fashioned uniform. He held a lantern that cast no light. His face was just a pale blur in the gloom, featureless. The train sat there, the open doors like hungry mouths. No one else got off. No one got on. Then with that same scraping sound, the doors slid shut. The conductor got back on board. Without a sound, without even a puff of that unholy steam, the train began to move. It slid back into the darkness it came from, the grinding fading until there was only silence again. I stayed hunched over for a long time, just listening to the frantic pounding of my own heart. Slowly, I lifted my head. The platform was empty. Track 7 was just a pair of rusted, weed-choked rails again. I glanced at my phone. The screen flickered, and the clock jumped to 3:18 a.m. The hum of the lights returned, and the grand clock in the hall was, once again, frozen at 4:30. It was over. I didn't sleep a wink for the rest of the shift. I just sat there, shaking, waiting for the sun. When Arthur showed up at 7 a.m. to relieve me, he took one look at my pale, haggard face and just nodded slowly. "You saw it then," he said. It wasn't a question. I just stared at him, unable to find any words. He sighed, a long, tired sound. "The first night is always the worst. You get used to it." Used to it. I finally managed to croak. "Arthur, what the hell is that thing?" He just shook his head, his eyes full of a tired pity. "It's the 317. It's been coming as long as anyone remembers. It was a wreck back in the 20s. A whole train just vanished. No wreckage, no survivors. Declared lost in transit. But it wasn't lost. It just found a different route." He patted my shoulder, his hand feeling as brittle as a dead leaf. "Just follow the rules, kid. Follow the rules, collect your pay, and don't think about it too much. It's the only way to stay sane." I should have quit. Any sane person would have walked out of that station and never looked back. But I didn't. The money was a big part of it, a powerful anchor holding me there. But there was something else, too. A morbid, terrifying curiosity. And a deeper, more chilling fear. What would happen if I did quit? Arthur's warning felt less like advice and more like a threat. What happens to the attendant who doesn't show up? Does the train just pass by, or does it come looking? So I went back. The second night, I was armed with a fresh thermos and a heart full of dread. The hours leading up to 3 a.m. were a slow-motion nightmare. When the whistling started, I was ready. I jammed my fingers in my ears before the melody could take hold. When the rumbling began, I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. 3:16 a.m. The world went silent. 3:17 a.m. The ghost train slid into view. This time, though, my fear was mixed with a little sliver of defiance. I wasn't going to spend the rest of this job cowering under a desk. I had to know more. Rule number 6, do not make eye contact. It seemed simple, but what if I just glanced? A quick peek. I kept my head down, but I angled my eyes up, looking at the windows of the car right in front of me. I could see them more clearly this time. Figures sat bolt upright in their seats, perfectly still. They were wearing old-fashioned clothes. Women in cloche hats, men in stiff collars and tweed suits. Their faces were all pale, their skin like stretched parchment over bone. They were all just staring straight ahead, their expressions blank, their eyes like dark, empty holes. Then one of them turned its head. Slowly, mechanically, a woman in the second row swiveled her head until she was facing my booth. Her eyes found mine. For a single, soul-shattering second, we made eye contact. There was nothing in her eyes. No light, no recognition, just a vast, hollow emptiness that seemed to pull at me, a void that promised an eternity of cold silence. The air in the booth instantly dropped 20 degrees. A wave of indescribable despair washed over me, so strong it made me want to cry. It was the feeling of utter hopelessness, of a grief so ancient it had scoured away everything else. I broke contact, gasping, my head snapping down to stare at the counter. A frosty pattern, like a spider web of ice, was spreading across the booth window right in front of my face. In the center of the frost, a perfect, ghostly handprint began to form, as if someone on the other side was pressing their palm against the glass. I squeezed my eyes shut, my whole body trembling. I'd broken a rule. I had looked, and it had seen me. I stayed that way, head down, eyes closed, until I heard the faint grinding of the train departing. When I finally dared to look up, my phone read 3:18 a.m. The frost and the handprint were gone. The experience left me shaken, but it also changed me. I realized the rules weren't just suggestions. They were like the laws of physics for this place. They were the only thing separating me from whatever those passengers were, trapped between one place and the next. The next week was a blur of sleepless days and terrifying nights. I learned the rhythm of it all, the whistling, the rumbling, the stillness, the arrival. I followed the rules like they were gospel. I kept my head down. I served my silent, spectral clientele. But on the third week, something different happened. The 3:17 arrived, same as always. I went through my ritual of avoidance, head bowed, waiting for the sound of its departure. But this time, I heard a different sound. A soft, rhythmic tap. Tap. Tapping on the glass of my booth. Rule number 7. If a passenger approaches your booth, pretend you do not see them. My blood ran cold. My eyes were screwed shut, but I could picture it perfectly. One of them had gotten off the train. One of them was right outside my booth. Tap, tap, tap. It was gentle, almost polite. Then came a voice, a small, whispery voice that seemed to slide right through the thick glass. "Mister, can you help me? I think I'm lost." It was a little girl's voice. My heart just seized up. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to look up, to help her. She sounded so scared, so alone. Tap, tap, tap. "Please, mister. My mommy said to find the man in the booth. She said you have a ticket for me." The final rule blazed in my mind. Never sell a ticket for the 3:17 a.m. ghost train. I knew it. This was a test, a sick, cruel test. I balled my hands into fists, digging my nails into my palms. I could feel tears welling in my eyes. The girl started to cry, these soft, heartbreaking sobs that echoed in the dead silence of 3:17 a.m. "I just want to go home," she wept. "Why won't you help me?" I couldn't take it. I slid off the stool and huddled on the floor, my back against the wall, my hands over my ears. I stayed there, curled into a ball, trying to block out the sound of her crying, until the familiar grinding noise signaled the train's departure. When the station lights flickered back on at 3:18, I was still on the floor, sobbing. That night broke something in me. The horror of the train wasn't abstract anymore. It was personal. This thing wasn't just a phenomenon I had to watch. It was smart. It could learn, adapt, and target my weaknesses. It had used a child's voice to try and trick me. I became obsessed. During the long, quiet hours of my shift, I started searching the station. If this had been happening for almost 100 years, there had to be records. There had to be more than just Arthur's warnings. My search led me to the old station master's office, a room thick with dust and the smell of decaying paper. Most of the file cabinets were empty, cleaned out decades ago. But in the back of a locked closet, behind a stack of moldering uniforms, I found a small, heavy wooden chest. The lock was rusted shut, but a few minutes with a tire iron from my trunk pried it open. Inside, nestled in yellowed cloth, were a series of leather-bound logbooks. The first one was dated 1928. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. The handwriting was this elegant, looping cursive. The first entry read, October 31st, 1928. My first night as attendant. Old Man Hemlock left me the keys and a list of most peculiar rules. I suspect the old fool has gone mad. I read on, my hands trembling, following this man's journey, Alistair Finch, from skepticism to dawning horror. His entries were almost identical to my own experiences. The whistling, the rumbling, the spectral train. He described the passengers as figures of sorrow, caught in a loop of their final moments. I flipped through the pages, through the years. Dozens of attendants, dozens of logbooks, each telling the same story. A secret history of this cursed place. Some entries were short and clinical, others were filled with terrified scrawls. One attendant from the 1950s, a man named George, wrote about finding a newspaper clipping about the wreck. The Astro Express vanished without a trace, March 12th, 1927. 112 souls aboard, lost to the fog. They say the engine was pushing too hard, trying to make up time in a storm. Then I found an entry that made my blood freeze. It was from 1988, written by a man named Daniel. His handwriting was shaky, erratic. Night 47. It knows me now. I looked too long. I saw a face I recognized. My brother, who passed 5 years ago. He was smiling at me from the window. The rules say to ignore them, but how can I ignore my own blood? The next entry was a week later. Night 54. It stopped for me. The train? It stopped. The conductor stepped out and offered me his hand. My brother was in the doorway, calling my name. He says it's not so bad on the other side. Quiet, peaceful. He says there's a seat for me. That was Daniel's last entry. The next page was blank. Then, in a different, neater handwriting, Arthur's, I recognized it, was a single line. Daniel learned too late. He boarded the train. We have a new opening for the night shift. I slammed the book shut, a strangled cry escaping my lips. It wasn't just a job, it was a position, a role that had to be filled. We weren't guards. We weren't attendants. We were replacements. We were the next potential passengers, held in reserve. Quitting wasn't an option. The train collects those who recognize it. Just by knowing about it, by waiting for it each night, we were already on its list. The only thing keeping us off was the booth and the rules. I finally understood the true horror of it. This job didn't end. It was a life sentence. Arthur wasn't just the guy before me. He was my future. A tired old man shuffling through his days, waiting for the night in the ghost train he was shackled to forever. My job wasn't to serve the dead. It was to pray I didn't join them. After finding those logs, my nights took on a grim, resigned quality. The fear was still there, a constant, cold companion, but the shock had been replaced by this weary acceptance. I was a keeper of secrets, a warden for a ghostly prison, and this was my life now. I followed the rules with the devotion of a zealot, my head bowed, my world shrinking to the four walls of that booth between 3 o'clock and 3:18 a.m. For months, the routine held. The whistling, the rumbling, the silent arrival and departure. No more tapping on my glass. No familiar faces in the windows. I started to feel a strange, dangerous sense of control, like I had finally mastered the ritual. That was my mistake. It was a Tuesday in early spring. Rain was lashing against the station, a relentless drumming that made the old building feel like it was at the bottom of the ocean. The hours ticked by. 3 a.m. came and went. I covered my ears for the whistle. The rumbling started, and I fixed my gaze on the counter. 3:16 a.m. Silence fell, even deeper because of the rain outside. 3:17 a.m. The ghost train slid into its berth on track 7, black steam coiling in the damp air. I kept my head down, counting the seconds. 60 seconds. That's how long it usually stayed. I counted to 60, then 60 more. It was still there. The grinding sound of its departure never came. A new kind of fear, sharp and piercing, cut right through my weariness. This was different. Slowly, against every ounce of my better judgment, I lifted my head. The train was just sitting there, its dark windows like vacant eyes. And then I saw it. One of the doors, directly in front of my booth, was sliding open with that horrible, grating sound. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to look away, to hide under the desk like before, but I was frozen, just mesmerized by the nightmare unfolding. A figure was standing in the doorway. It was a woman. She was wearing a simple blue dress, her dark hair pinned up in a way that looked achingly familiar. The figure stepped out onto the platform. The rain didn't seem to touch her. She turned her face toward my booth, and the world just fell out from under me. It was my mother. She died 7 years ago. Cancer. I held her hand when she took her last breath, and now she was standing on the platform of a ghost train, looking exactly as she did the summer before she got sick. Healthy, vibrant, real. "Honey," she called out, her voice the exact perfect timbre I remembered, a voice I'd only heard in dreams for 7 years. "What are you doing in there? I was on my way to visit, but the train stopped here. I saw you." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My mind was screaming every rule. Do not make eye contact. Do not speak to them. It isn't real. It's a test. But my heart was breaking. "Come on, open the door," she said, her smile so warm and loving The same smile she'd given me 1,000 times. She took a step closer to the booth. "It's cold out here. Let me in." Tears streamed down my face. "Mom?" I whispered, the word like a shattered piece of glass in my throat. "Of course, honey. It's me." She was right at the window now, her hand resting on the glass. It didn't frost over. She felt warm. She felt real. "I don't know what this place is, but I don't like it. Let's go home." "It's not her. It's not her. It's the train. It's a trick." My mind chanted the mantra, but seeing her, hearing her voice was overwhelming my sanity. This was the ultimate test. It had read my mind, my deepest grief, and forged it into a weapon. "I need a ticket, honey," she said softly, her eyes pleading. "The conductor said I need a ticket to leave. Can you give me one? Please, I just want to go home." Never sell a ticket for the 3:17 a.m. ghost train. The final rule, the most important one. All I had to do was nothing, just sit here until it gave up. But how could I deny my own mother? Even if there was a 1 in a billion chance it was really her, trapped and lost. How could I live with myself if I did nothing? My hand twitched, moving toward the antique ticket dispenser on the counter, a relic from the station's active days. 1 ticket. That's all she wanted. Her smile widened. "That's it, honey. Just 1 ticket. Then we can leave this awful place." I looked into her eyes, those warm, loving eyes, and I saw it. Just for a flicker of a second. A deep, cold, hollow emptiness behind them. The same void I'd seen in the eyes of that other passenger. It was a mask. A perfectly crafted mask of my mother. But underneath was nothing. Just the train. Just its hunger. With a sob that tore out of my soul, I snatched my hand back from the dispenser. "No," I choked out. "No, you're not her." The smile on her face didn't vanish. It stretched. It widened unnaturally, pulling the corners of her mouth up toward her ears, her teeth suddenly looking too long, too sharp. Her loving eyes went black, becoming those empty, bottomless pits. Wrong answer. The thing wearing my mother's face hissed, its voice no longer warm, but a chorus of scraping metal and graveyard dirt. It lunged at the booth. The glass shuddered, bowing inward under a force that should have shattered it. A spiderweb of cracks erupted from where it hit, but the pain held. The creature shrieked, a sound of pure rage, and slammed its fists against the glass again and again. I scrambled back, falling off my stool, and watched in abject terror as the face of my mother distorted and melted, the features running like wax until it was just a pale, screaming, featureless mask of fury. The train's whistle blew, a deafening, soul-tearing shriek that vibrated through the entire station. The creature gave the glass one last hateful strike, and then it dissolved, melting back into the black, oily steam as it was pulled into the open car. The door scraped shut. The whistle died, and the ghost train, having failed its test, finally, mercifully, began to move. It slid away into the rainy darkness, leaving me alone on the floor of my protected cage, weeping for a mother I had just lost for a second time. Conclusion. The sun rose, but it brought no warmth. I left the station that morning a changed man, not just scared or resigned. I was broken. The train hadn't taken my body, but it had taken something else. It had taken the last shred of hope that I could ever escape this job. It had shown me that it knew my heart, and it would use my deepest loves against me. I am its prisoner as surely as if I were sitting in one of those spectral cars. I didn't call Arthur. I didn't quit. What was the point? The logbooks were clear. To abandon my post would be to signal that I was done being an observer. I would become a passenger in waiting. My only safety is here, in this dusty booth, counting down the hours to 3:17 a.m. Weeks turned into months. I stopped telling people what I do for a living. I stopped seeing friends. My life is a cycle of sleepless days and watchful nights. I'm a ghost in my own life, just haunting the daylight hours, waiting for my shift to begin. The train comes every night. I never look up. I never listen. I just endure. One evening, as I was settling in for my shift, I noticed something on the counter, the laminated rule sheet. I picked it up, my heart giving a familiar lurch of fear. I knew those 8 rules by heart. I'd chanted them like a prayer 1,000 times. But now, there was something new. Below the final underlined rule, there was a new line of text. It was in the same neat typed font, but the ink was darker, sharper. It looked impossibly fresh. My hands trembled as I read the new edition, my blood turning to ice. Rule number 9. You have 1 ticket in the dispenser. Do not waste it. You'll know when to use it. I looked at the old brass ticket dispenser. I'd always assumed it was empty. Now, with a shaking hand, I tentatively pushed the lever. With a stiff, grinding click, a single cardboard ticket slid out of the slot. It's blank. No destination, no price. Just an empty space waiting to be filled. And now I understand the final terrible truth. I'm not just a warden or a gatekeeper. I'm part of the system, a functionary with one horrifying task left to do. The rules weren't just to protect me from the train. They were to prepare me for my real job. One day someone is going to come to my window. Someone living. Someone who, for some terrible reason, needs a ticket for the 3:17 a.m. ghost train. And according to this new rule, my job will be to sell it to them. I'm no longer just waiting for the train. I'm waiting for its next passenger. And the question that keeps me awake during the lonely sunlit hours is this: who will I be selling that ticket to? And what happens when the dispenser is empty? The silence in this station is a heavy thing. It's filled with unanswered questions and the ghosts of 100 years of fear. If you've ever had a job that felt like it was taking a piece of your soul, you know a fraction of what these nights are like. Let me know in the comments. Do you think I made the right choice, or should I have given her the ticket? And if you want to hear more from the graveyard shift, make sure you subscribe. You never know what might pull into the station next. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do, don't miss your train. Unless it's the 3:17.